It was a freezing morning when Officer Daniels sat alone with his lunch. Suddenly, he felt a pair of sad eyes watching him. A starving German shepherd stood in the snow, trembling, as if silently asking, "Can I eat with you?" What the officer did next shocked everyone. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The icy wind whistled down the empty street, carrying with it the sharp bite of winter. Snow crunched under Officer Daniels' boots as he made his way to a quiet outdoor cafe, one of the few places still open on this freezing morning. He finally sat down, his breath visible in the frosty air, and placed a steaming plate of roasted chicken and bread on the table. It was supposed to be a rare, peaceful break from his long patrol. Daniels rubbed his hands together for warmth, sighing with relief as he lifted a piece of bread. But before he could take a bite, he felt something, an eerie sensation, like someone was watching him. Slowly, he turned his head toward the street. There, standing in the thin veil of falling snow, was a German shepherd. Its fur was damp and matted, ribs faintly visible under its coat. The dog didn't bark or move. It just stared at him with big, sorrowful eyes that spoke 1,000 words without a sound. Daniels froze, his heart tightening in his chest. The dog trembled, shifting one paw in the snow, as if silently asking, "Can I eat with you?" Officer Daniels' gloved hands froze midair as he locked eyes with the German shepherd. Those eyes weren't just hungry. They were desperate, tired, and pleading for a kindness the world had long denied. Snowflakes clung to the dog's fur, and a visible shiver ran through its body as the cold wind brushed past. Daniels slowly lowered the bread back onto his plate, his heart heavy. He scanned the street, expecting someone, anyone, to appear and claim the dog, but the sidewalks were empty. It became clear, this poor soul was alone. His stomach twisted as he noticed the dog hesitantly take one step closer, then pause, as if unsure whether to trust the man before it. He remembered the briefing earlier that week, multiple reports of abandoned dogs struggling to survive the harsh winter. Most didn't make it past the first frost. Daniels had promised himself he'd help if he ever came across one. And now, here it was, looking at him as though his decision would determine its fate. "Hey there, buddy," Daniels whispered softly, crouching slightly, careful not to startle him. His voice carried warmth, even over the bitter wind. "Are you hungry?" The dog's ears flicked, and for the first time, hope flickered in its eyes. The German shepherd hesitated, its paws sinking slightly into the thin layer of snow. Eyes locked on the steaming plate in front of Officer Daniels. Hunger and fear battled inside the dog's mind. A cold gust blew by, and the faint smell of roasted chicken drifted through the air, making the dog whimper softly. Daniels felt his chest tighten. "It's okay, boy," he said gently, sliding a piece of warm chicken across the table's edge and letting it fall onto the ground. He didn't move, giving the dog the space to decide. For a long, heart-stopping moment, the world was silent except for the whisper of the wind and distant city sounds. Then, with trembling caution, the dog approached. Each step was hesitant, but the scent of food and the softness in the officer's voice gave it courage. Finally, the dog lowered its head and took a cautious bite, chewing slowly, as if it couldn't believe this moment was real. Daniels couldn't help but smile. "That's it. There you go," he whispered, watching the animal's ribs move with each careful breath. In that simple act, sharing food with a stray, he felt the invisible wall of fear between them start to crumble. As the dog finished the first piece of chicken, it looked up at Officer Daniels with wide, uncertain eyes. Snowflakes clung to its fur, and its breath formed soft clouds in the cold air. Daniels held out another piece, crouching slightly to make himself smaller, less intimidating. For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a silent plea for trust. The German shepherd crept closer this time, no longer trembling quite as much. Its nose brushed against Daniel's glove as it took the second piece. Daniels felt a warmth spread through him despite the freezing wind. "You've been out here a while, haven't you?" he murmured, his voice filled with both sorrow and hope. Around them, life moved on. Cars drove past, pedestrians hurried by, but in that tiny snowy corner, It was just a lonely dog and a kind-hearted officer sharing a fragile bond. Daniels noticed a faint scar across the dog's ear, a hint of the harsh life it had endured. For the first time, the dog's tail gave the tiniest wag, a flicker of gratitude. Daniel smiled softly. He realized this was more than just a meal. It was the beginning of a fragile friendship built on kindness. Officer Daniels felt a pang of relief as the dog finished another bite, but his joy was quickly replaced by concern. When the dog shifted its weight, Daniels noticed a limp in its back leg. The fur was matted, and a thin streak of dried blood clung to its paw. His heart sank. This dog hadn't just been hungry. It had been hurt, and no one had cared. He moved slowly, keeping his voice calm. "Easy, boy. I just want to see," he whispered, reaching out. The dog flinched, taking a hesitant step back, ears pinned in fear. Daniels froze, letting the silence speak. Then, after a long moment, the dog sniffed his hand and allowed him closer. Daniels gently examined the paw. It wasn't broken, but the cut was deep enough to have made every step painful. He felt his chest tighten with anger at the thought of this poor animal wandering the streets alone, hurt and starving. As he wrapped the paw in his spare scarf, the dog pressed its head lightly against his knee, a quiet sign of trust. Daniels realized then that this wasn't just a stray. It was a survivor, desperately clinging to the faint hope of kindness. Officer Daniels knew he couldn't leave the dog out in the freezing night. He took off his jacket and gently draped it over the trembling animal. The dog tensed for a moment, then relaxed into the sudden warmth, its eyes closing halfway, as if savoring the first comfort it had felt in days. Snow crunched under Daniel's boots as he slowly led the dog toward his patrol car. At first, the animal hesitated, glancing nervously at the vehicle, but a soft pat on the seat and a quiet, "Come on, buddy," was all it took. The dog climbed in cautiously, curling up on the blanket Daniels had placed there. Driving to the station, Daniels couldn't help but glance at the dog in the rearview mirror. Its ribs were visible even under the thick fur, and its eyes carried the weight of a long, lonely struggle. "You're safe now," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring the dog or himself. When they arrived, Daniels carefully carried the dog into the small animal shelter section of the station. The warmth inside made the dog sigh in relief. For the first time, Daniels saw it settle down completely, its tail giving a faint, hopeful wag. The next morning, Officer Daniels returned to the station earlier than usual. He carried a small bowl of warm chicken and rice, hoping the dog had made it through the night. As he stepped into the shelter area, he was greeted by the soft thump of a tail against the kennel floor. The dog lifted its head, eyes brighter than the night before, and gave a hopeful little whine. Daniels knelt down and opened the kennel slowly. "Good morning, buddy," he said softly, setting the bowl in front of the dog. This time, there was no hesitation. The dog ate eagerly but paused several times to glance up at him, as if saying thank you with its eyes. When the meal was done, Daniels scratched behind the dog's ears. The animal leaned into his touch, its body trembling, not from cold this time, but from relief. In that moment, Daniels knew he couldn't let this dog go back to the streets. He made the decision right there. He would foster it, maybe even adopt it. Days later, the dog had a name, Lucky, and a warm bed at Daniel's home. What began as a starving plea on a snowy night had turned into a bond that melted countless hearts.